Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining my Trash Talk. My name is Kevin Lunzalu, and I am super delighted to be here and presenting the findings and the outcomes of my capstone project, which took place in Kenya between June 2022 and May 2023. So I'm going to share my screen. Great. So the title of my capstone project is The Plastic Crisis, a reality show we can only cancel collectively. And this capstone project was carried out in Kenya, and it mainly looked at co-creating a sustainable pathway for addressing marine plastic pollution in critical habitats along the Kenyan coast, using Diani Beach as a case study. So let's look at the overview of the plastic crisis in the world and specifically in Kenya. So since the plastics were introduced in the world, we have collectively consumed over 8.3 billion metric tons of plastics. And this means that we have a bigger impact in the environment, bigger impact on the human health and society at large. We are consuming over 1.2 million plastic bottles per minute. And these are mainly single-use plastics that end up in our waterways, end up in our reserves, and definitely most of them also end up in our marine ecosystems. Approximately 91% of plastics that are produced globally are not recycled. And this can be attributed to a number of issues, including, limited infrastructure for recycling plastics, the nature of some of the plastics, the chemicals that are used, or some of them are collected when they are already like super degraded and they cannot be recycled. And some of them are just not meant for recycling. The components that make up the plastics themselves cannot be reused after use. So we are also using 5 trillion plastic bags globally. And the unfortunate thing is that it takes thousands of years for plastics to break down. This means that the impact of plastics continues to live on for generations. And this is passed down the generations and in humans and also, in our natural environment. At least 14 million tons of plastics are deposited in our oceans every single year. And this is a huge amount of plastics if you put it into context, considering that this amount keeps growing per minute. We are increasingly using plastics as items of convenience. You're feeling thirsty, you're grabbing a glass, a bottle of water along the way. You want to take your drink, you're using a straw. You are ordering medicine, they come wrapped in plastics. So plastics are literally everywhere, and the way our society is currently engineered is that it's very hard for one to avoid using plastics. And this is why we are having an increasing problem that has now been categorized as the 3rd planetary crisis, only behind climate change and biodiversity loss. The plastic crisis has been recognized by the UN, the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, as being the 3rd planetary crisis that humanity is currently facing. And this calls for a joint effort, a whole of society, a whole of government, approach to deal with this crisis and try to find solutions that will outlive us as a generation. Because if business as usual goes on, then we are headed to a dead end. So let's look at the primary victims in terms of marine environment of this planetary crisis. And in this case, we're talking about sea turtles. So in Kenya, we have a number of species. We have 5 species that grace our ocean in Kenya, but globally we have 7 species of sea turtles. And the ones that are found in Kenya are the greens, the hawksbills, the loggerheads, the olive ridleys, and the leatherbacks. So just a brief information about sea turtles. I know most people know them as very charismatic animals. Yes, they are. They're also super migratory, and they are ancient reptiles. They have graced our oceans for millions of years. And apart from just being the awesome beings that they are, sea turtles also play a fundamental role, in the lives in the ocean, but also to our livelihoods as human beings. When they migrate, and because they are long distance migrators, sea turtles carry other species with them. We have small crustaceans that ride on their backs, to cover the distances. They also shelter other small fishes from predators, so like hiding under the belly from predators. And they are also wonderful controllers of the entire ecosystem. I mean, at some point, some of the species are, grazers, and so they feed on, on seagrass and other, marine plants. And this regulates the populations of those plantations, if I can call them, and also contribute to the health of coral reefs. So sea turtles are, ecosystem engineers, important engineers of the marine world. When they come to nest, there are also a number of benefits that both human beings and the ocean get. When they're depositing their eggs on the beach, they simultaneously deposit important nutrients that contribute to growth of beach vegetation. And as human beings, we enjoy watching turtles, we enjoy seeing them. So that aesthetic value, the value of having sea turtles in our oceans is way huge. That is very difficult to measure it in financial terms. It's hard to put a dollar on the value of just seeing the little hatchlings coming out of the sand and running to the ocean, and just like the mature ones and the juvenile ones going about their businesses in the ocean and just keeping our ocean breathing. It's very, very great, and it's something that we should feel blessed to have. So this project is taking place on Diani Beach, which is located the south coast of the Kenya's coastline, or the south coast of Kenya. And this beach is a significant nesting place for 3 species of sea turtles. We're talking about the green turtles, we're talking about the hawksbills, and we're talking about the olive ridleys. In the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature's, criteria or categorization of how endangered these species are, the green turtles are considered already endangered, meaning that their populations have dwindled to a place where they are almost facing extinction. So we only have a few of those left in our waters. For the hawksbills, the case is even worse. These are critically endangered, meaning we even have fewer numbers of those remaining in our oceans. And for the olive ridley, the status is vulnerable, meaning that they're not yet there yet in terms of being endangered and being closer to extinction, but they are headed there, meaning that they are exposed to agents of mortality and agents that reduce their population. And if we do not act in time, they are also gonna be endangered, then critically endangered, and could go extinct. And so what does a sea turtle mean to a local Kenyan, to an average Kenyan from, the local community? And sea turtles symbolize a number of things. They are much more important when they're alive than when they are dead to, most of the local communities, the coastal communities in Kenya. The first thing is that sea turtles are symbols of good luck. So if you're going out to fish and bumping into a sea turtle, that's a sign of, good luck. So that day probably you're gonna have, a bumper harvest, or rather a bumper, fish catch. They're also a sign of fertility. They bring around, good luck, especially if you are, a believer of such, which most traditional people used to be. So fertility and protection, is attributes that are affiliated to sea turtles. As I mentioned before, they contribute immensely to the health of the ecosystem, both the open ocean waters and also the beach habitats where they nest. Sea turtles are also being increasingly admired by tourists, and so the turtle tourism, the sea turtle tourism, is growing or has been growing over time. There's actually research that looked at, how much does it, cost, or how much does it bring in if you keep a sea turtle alive versus if you kill it and you sell the parts, say the eggs, the meat, and the shell. And this research found out that, you derive almost thrice the amount of value in monetary aspect, like the amount of money you get from ecotourism, sea turtle related tourism, is thrice more than the amount of money you get from killing a turtle and then selling the parts. So it is growingly a lucrative industry, the sea turtle tourism industry. And as I mentioned before, sea turtles are also just like so cool. They transport other animals in the ocean and also protect them from predators. However, the sea turtles are facing a number of challenges that are related to plastic pollution. And I will highlight just 3 of them, even though the challenges are way broad and complicated than this. The first major challenge is obstruction. So especially for nesting sea turtles, and I must remind you that this project is looking at the nesting side of things. So previous research has enormously concentrated on sea turtles, like ingesting plastics while they are feeding in the ocean. But my capstone project is trying to look at what happens in terms of the interaction of sea turtles and plastics when they come to nest on the beach. And so one of the things is obstruction. So obstruction happens in 2 forms. One is when the sea turtle, the mother sea turtle, comes to nest on the beach, if the concentration of plastics on the beach is huge, the beach is more unsuitable for the nesting sea turtle. And so in most cases, this sea turtle will try to look for a more convenient place to nest. And if that means going further inland, it can expose it to other agents of mortality, including like poaching, and where like the eggs are eaten by other animals and stuff like that. And when they are hatching, after the incubation period, these hatchlings have to make a dash to the ocean. So if the prevalence of the plastic is huge, then the younglings will find it hard to reach the ocean. And that also exposes it to, predation. The birds will come and pick them, the crabs, people can tumble on them and stuff like that. Some of them can even, die, before reaching the ocean because of the increased, resistance when they're trying to meander to the ocean where the next phase of life begins. Another issue is entanglement. So especially with rope-like plastics and discarded fishing gear, when the citadels are either coming to nest or they've just been hatched, they get entangled in these plastics, and then that sometimes induces mortality. And generally just the loss of habitat because of this increased concentration of plastics. So the turtles will come to nest because when turtles are hatched at a specific beach, let's say Diani Beach here in Kenya, they will always have to come back to nest, let's say 20 years from now, because it takes about 20 years between when a citadel is hatched to sexual maturity, and then coming back to now starting to nest. So assuming they're hatched today, 20 years from now, they will come back to nest here at Diani Beach. And that, if the concentration of plastics at that time is, let's say, 5 times what they left, or 10 times, or 1,000,000 times, the beach won't be suitable for nesting anymore. And this means that this citadel will be, artificially displaced from its nesting location. So we are looking at things like this one. So this is a beach that is full of plastics, and the citadel has to come out and nest here. You can imagine the amount of disturbance, or if the hatchlings are laid here, or if the hatchlings come out of such an environment, it will make it very difficult for them to dash to the ocean. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to convert this into this, where, the things are clear, it is all suitable, it is all, plastic free. But how do we create such a pathway where our beaches look like this for a long time? Our beaches look like this beyond just today, where we have just, finished a beach cleanup. And that is what this capstone is all about, co-creating a sustainable pathway that will see us move from such a scenario to this, but on a long-term and also a large scale, not just this specific beach, but all the nesting beaches in Kenya. And so in terms of where the project was conducted, it took place in Diani Beach, and Diani Beach is located in south of Kenya, the south coast, and it is a little thing to the south named Kwale. So Kwale is the county within which Diani Beach is located. And in terms of background, Diani Beach is very touristic. It is very, it's globally renowned as a tourist attraction because of, the extensive, sandy beaches that occur here. But that is also hugely under threat because, the threat of plastic is increasing over time, and we need to find immediate solutions. So the dots that are on that little map, the black dots indicate the nesting sites for citadel. So I partnered with a local organization that tries to look at citadel nesting patterns. And this was handy because then I knew where to concentrate my efforts. So the black dots are where citadels come to nest, and this is data from the past like 2 years. And as you can see, some of the dots are super close. They're almost forming a continuous line. And that means that that specific area has a high concentration of nests. And I looked at that data and then drew this map as a way of showing me where I need to concentrate my efforts in terms of, implementing my capstone project. Like, so looking at how is the concentration of plastics in the nesting zones of these citadels and what can be done. And not just the concentration of plastics, but what types of plastics are going there? What are the potential sources of these plastics, and so that we can see and determine what the types of stakeholders to engage moving forward, and the kind of information and communication, basically just like creating a case for citadels that are nesting in these zones and the plastic scenario, and how we can collectively move forward into addressing this challenge. And so, having looked at that, my capstone project had 3 main objectives. The first one was to test in local context a citizen science model that will contribute to policy relevant interventions by providing data that fills into the current existing gaps. And one of those gaps is the fact that even though there has been, for many years, there has been some sort of research going on, some of the research that has been done does not necessarily concentrate on the nesting aspect. And so filling in the data that shows plastic concentration on nesting beaches will provide a holistic overview and will complement existing research on the impact of plastics on citadels, because then it will provide the data on the nesting side and complement the one that is available on the feeding side. The other objective looked at having informal dialogues with a range of role players. We're talking about fishermen, we're talking about the private sector, we're talking about local community members, beach management unit, citadel scouts, youth, and local decision makers. So just like convening space where these role players will have a broad discussion about where are we in terms of marine plastics and citadel nesting, where have we come from, and where should we be headed in terms of co-creating solutions to this challenge. And the third objective was to utilize insights from both the data side of things and the dialogue side of things to now inform, policy dialogues, utilizing opportunities that arose during the duration of my capstone project. So basically, this looked at the insights that I'm getting from the brand audits from plastics and the dialogue with role players to now create, solid messages that will feed into, policy discussions around plastics. And so my capstone project had 4 main deliverables. One was to create a plastic data set, more like an initial tool that will house all the data that I will collect, on the plastic types, the potential sources, the amount, that is the weight of these plastics, and just house them into a data set. So for now, I used a Google spreadsheet, just like a massive spreadsheet that housed this kind of data. But later, the next stage of this capstone would be to now find a place, whether it is a mobile application or a website that can host this data and can be more meaningful and more accessible to other users to keep contributing data to this tool, so that we can continuously evaluate and analyze how best to inform actions by different role players in terms of addressing marine plastics. The second deliverable was having a dialogue on the future of plastics. So just like I mentioned, bringing people together to discuss, the pathway to sustainability. The third one was to create information. So giving out information and raising awareness around, handling plastics, especially, like proper waste disposal, how the situation is playing out on the ground, because I understand that some of the decisions that we make as human beings come from a point of ignorance. And so if people are made aware of what impact single-use plastics is making on critical habitats, then they are more likely to change the way they view and interact with plastics. And the fourth one was policy advocacy and lobbying. So basically, creating solid, convincing messages that make sense to politicians and other decision makers, especially at this time when the world is negotiating a treaty that will be legally binding, that is also looking at controlling the plastic sector in a way that looks at the entire spectrums, from pre-production, production, consumption, disposal, and waste management. So the world, through a resolution that was adopted in 2022, agreed to come together and have a legally binding framework by 2024 that will try to, reduce the impact of plastics on the environment, but also on the human front, such as like human health. And so to actualize my project, I carried out a series of brand audits. So brand audits are basically, you go to a beach, you collect all the plastics that are there, you sort them, and then you categorize them. And to do that, I used tools that had already been created by other organizations and utilized elsewhere. For example, this one is a tool that was created by an organization called Break Free from Plastic, which at some point, supported my brand audits through, small grants and tools like this. And this tool helps the people who are carrying out brand audits to accurately categorize the litter and the plastics that they collect on the beach. So as you can see, their health packages, their food packaging materials, personal care products, and it also moves from just the type of the product to the type of packaging, so that you can even move further if you want to accurately identify the type of plastic that you collected. For example, if it is single-use plastic and it's water bottle, they are under the PET category, and this is the type of the material that is used to make the packaging. And then there's the HDPE, there's PVC, there's PP, there's PS, there's ML. So ML is different from the PETs and the PPs. ML simply means that the product that you have collected or the product that you're looking at has multi-layers of plastics. So it means that during the manufacturing time, the manufacturers used multiple layers to realize the final product that they put in the market. And this is important because then it also helps inform you of how much of time this kind of product can stay in our environment, but also the relevance of it. Like, do we really need to do that? Do we really need to make such a packaging material that, strong, or use all those resources? If it is just gonna be like single use, or how can we transition that kind of manufacturing to a more sustainable kind of manufacturing? So looking at the types of the material, the layers that are involved is crucial to understand where we are in terms of manufacturing, what the companies are doing in terms of the products that they put out in the market, and how can we then intervene? What messages do we need to create for them to be more sustainable? And so once you have identified the plastics that you have collected, there is the classification table that helps to put everything into perspective, whether they're plastic bags or hard plastic containers, they're polystyrene, they're PET, PVC plastic, and it gives examples of each of these clusters and examples of the materials or the products that fall under the categories. So this tool is meant to help those who are doing brand audits to be more accurate and accurately categorize such information. The weighing of the plastics happens on the ground, so in this case on the beach, after the cleanup has been done. And the reason why we weigh the plastics is to know the amount of plastics that are flowing into this beach, and then look at it over time. And so when extrapolated, it gives you a general overview of, let's say, how much single-use water bottles are flowing into Diani Beach per month. And you weigh only after you have sorted. So it means that you have put, let's say, cigarette lighters on one side, water bottles on the other side. You put everything on this foam on the side, flops on the side, and then you weigh them separately, so that in your data records, you can know for sure that you collected, let's say, 100 kgs of flip-flops, 1 ton of single-use water bottles, and other materials. And when we are entering the data or while on the beach, this is how the form looks like. So it is a simple form that has already been categorized. And I must say that this is the tool that's also from Break Free from Plastic. And so on the first column, you just write it as you see it in terms of the brand name. If it is, if it is a Coca-Cola water bottle, you write Coca-Cola water bottle. And then in the description, if it is a plastic bottle, if it is a beer bottle, if it is a cigarette lighter, you write it in the description. So the first column is to identify the brand. The second column is to describe the brand, the item itself. The third column then goes to the specific type of the products, whether it is food packaging, whether it is personal care, and all this categorization that I explained in the previous slides. And this is also a chance for you to write whether the item is single layered or multi-layered. And then you move to the fourth column where you enter the type of the material that is that the product is made from. And in most cases, the type of the material is usually written on the product itself. For example, if you look at the bottom of a bottle or a milk package, you will see something like PET or HDPE or PVC or stuff like that. So in most cases, the material type is indicated on the package, but just in case it is not, we usually use the categorization in this particular form to help us know which type of material the specific plastic product is made from. And then once we have identified the layers, we now move to counting. And the way we do the counting is we write the counts and then stroke at 5. So if you have like 10 single-use bottles, you will write every time you encounter a bottle, you will write in the count. And then once they get to 5, you cross them. And then there's a final column where you do the total. So if there were 200, you just write 200 on the the column on the farthest end on your right. So this is how the data looks when we are collecting it on the ground, but this is how it looks on the spreadsheet, the massive spreadsheet that we work on. And after we insert data, we regularly update the date on which the data was inserted. For example, the latest date to update this spreadsheet was the 29th of May this year. And so every time a new information is added or new data is added, we update the date. And so the spreadsheet captures all the information that is captured on the the raw data sheet, but it also goes ahead to capture things like the actual forms that were used in the field. So there is a column on this data sheet, on this spreadsheet. There is a data sheet that has a link to all the raw data sheets that were used on the ground. So just in case you want to verify something, you can always go back to the raw spreadsheet or the folder that has the photos of all the data sheets that were used on the ground, and then you can counter check them. And if you need to change anything or just confirm anything, they are there as a backup. Or if anything happens to this spreadsheet, then the raw data sheets are kept as a backup to this one. It also has a country list, and the purpose of having the country list is so that we can confirm the country in which a product comes from. Because one of the things that we indicate in the data collection sheet is where the manufacturer is located. For example, if it is the Kenya Breweries Limited, and we don't know where the Kenya Breweries Limited is located, we can use the country list as a reference point, and this is more useful when the product only captures the city where the product is manufactured without mentioning the country. For example, if you find a perfume that is also only written Paris, and as a data collector, maybe you don't know where Paris is located, then this country list comes in handy to help you locate that. So major cities, towns, coastal areas, that's how the country list comes in. And then there's the brand list. The brand list complements the country list. So what we have done with the brand list is to create a list of, the major companies that are manufacturing mostly plastics and where they are located. So using the brand list, if you can't find help with the country list, you can move to the brand list. And the brand list will, for example, tell you where Coca-Cola is located, where Nestle is located, where Kenya Breweries Limited is located, where British American tobacco headquarters are located, and stuff like that. So the purpose of the brand list is to complement the country list so that as a data collector, you can have a better understanding of the potential source of where the plastics that are ending up in the beach are coming from. And lastly, we have the organization list. So the organization list is a tool that shows basically some of the organizations that are trying to work on these issues of plastics. So just in case you need allies, or you need to see the sort of campaigns that they're doing, or you need to see the current direction that maybe the civil society is taking in terms of plastics, you can find this organization list useful. But then we extended the organization list to also include those that we feel like we should be, bringing them into the discussion. And soon we're gonna expand that to also the companies that should be bringing, that we should be talking to or bringing into the conversation. Because the war on plastic is not just about alliance building with allies, it's also about bringing those who are not on the same side as you to the conversation, to the table. And, just like discussing them, having a very kind of an open conversation about where we are and where we should be moving, and the shared and differentiated roles that everyone needs to play if we have to make a sustainable impact. And so looking at the general overview of what my brand audits have been showing me, single-use plastics, especially single-use water bottles, cigarette lighters, discarded fishing gear, styrofoams, and the styrofoams are made mostly from, the items that make, the nets float, and also, so those like the net floaters, and also the shipping, the packaging, shipping materials. As you know, the coastline, or rather the Kenyan coast, has a huge, harbor that brings in huge amounts of shipped materials, not just for Kenya, but also other neighboring countries, especially the landlocked countries like, Uganda, Rwanda, and the rest. And so that comes with a cost, and this packaging materials from the shipping industries are also, showing up a lot on the beach. And then flip-flops are also like a huge cause for concern in the items that we collect. And most importantly, what we need to also discuss is the increasing waste that is medical waste that is being found on our beach. So what I'm presenting right now is a 20-liter jerrycan that is full of medical waste, syringes, test kits. I think this look like COVID-19 test kits. There are also medical, bottles. Most of them are plastic, some of them are glass, that end up on this beach. And that was very awakening to me, because when I started this project, 12 months ago, I didn't imagine that, the big pharma, or rather the medical industry, is also key contributor of the waste that comes to our beaches. And so just expanded my scope that we need to expand this talk beyond just single-use bottles and manufacturers of those, but even get to the unfamiliar scapes that is the big pharma. As you can see, some of the litter here is branded, so we can know for sure which companies they're coming from. And we need to bring those into the discussion so that they can also be equal partners in the vision. They can help transform the plastic industry. And so what were the overall outcomes of my project? So one is that I created an initial database of plastics that looked at, the types of plastics, the amount of those plastics, the potential sources of those plastics, and generally the type of industries or role players that are behind them. Another thing is, through this, regular beach cleanups and brand audits, we collected over 2 tons of plastics, and just like keeping the areas where I was working a little bit better than I found them, more like just like cleaning after myself, but also at the same time collecting useful data that I believe can be integral in shaping the pathways of dealing with plastics moving forward. Another outcome is that I teamed up with a team of early career ocean professionals from across the world to create a traveling workshop, a 3-day traveling workshop that looked at the future of plastics, marine plastics, and how we can create pathways towards solving them. And the outcome of this, workshop was a paper that we published and was published by the Oxford University Press. Actually, it was editor's choice, and it is open access, that looked at who is being engaged and who is not being engaged. Where are we in terms of plastics? What are the sources? And where do we need to look at in terms of the future of plastics? Another thing that came out of my project was policy advocacy. And this came out very strongly. I started engaging with, policymakers, I think like 3 months into this project, when I had, just like a limited overview of how the plastic situation was playing out. And I continued on that path. So one was just like advancing my capstone on the ground, but also advancing the talks that I have with decision makers, especially when opportunities arose for me to do so. And I did that in multiple, platforms. The initial one was when I was invited as a youth delegate to the African Ministerial Conference on Environment, what they call AMSEN, and this happened in Dakar, Senegal, in September. So one of the main agendas of AMSEN, which actually, by the way, brought together about 54 ministers of environment from across the African continent, one of the main agendas was to discuss the priorities of the African region in terms of plastics. So things like tackling the entire value chain of plastics from pre-production to safe disposal, things like circular economy, open air burning of waste, and the interlink between pollution and climate change were some of the things. And so I was privileged to be part of a team that was drafting this position. And this provided me with an opportunity to also, raise some of the issues that I wanted to be raised. For example, the need to have like a more holistic understanding of plastics, and the recognition of the role that informal waste pickers are playing in collecting plastics, but also which can be utilized as an opportunity to gain insightful data that can help us move forward. Things like just robust recycling instrument and infrastructure awareness creation, and the element of polluter pays responsibility, extended producer responsibility, and also just looking at the aspect of removal of plastics as an ecosystem rehabilitation process. I know in the past, or mainly even in presently, plastic removal from our ecosystem is not discussed in the lenses of ecosystem restoration. But I personally believe that critical areas such as this beach where sea turtles are nesting should be viewed in the lenses of, if we are conserving them and we are removing external stressors like plastics, then we are actually rehabilitating them. We are restoring them. So I believe it is time that role players should start looking at plastics and addressing plastics as an ecosystem restoration practice. Another opportunity that I got was that of the CBD, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP15, that happened in Montreal, Canada, in December 2022. And I went there as a leader of the youth delegation from my country. And this gave me an opportunity to meet the Minister of Environment and have a face-to-face discussion. And one of the things that we fronted was the need to keep the target on plastic pollution in the negotiations of the CBD. I know that there was already a proposed draft target 7, that looked at pollution generally, but we wanted specifically plastic, as a text to appear in the final adopted text. So we wanted the target not just to be like overall looking at pollution, but also specifically highlighting the plastic crisis as one of the things that should be addressed by countries that are parties to the convention, as one of the ways of preserving their biodiversity. And there is a direct link between marine pollution and biodiversity loss. And that can be demonstrated through projects such as this one that I'm doing, where marine plastics are directly contributing or threatening the existence of sea turtles. It means that increased concentration of marine plastics will drive sea turtle mortality. So hence resulting in a direct loss of already endangered biodiversity. And then another chance that I had for policy intervention was the recent window by my government here in Kenya to review its Climate Action Act. So I had the opportunity through public participation to lead a team of young people that were giving input on Climate Action Act, or the Climate Change Act. And one of the things that I proposed touched on the need to have a whole of society, whole of government approach in addressing marine plastics in Kenya. And lastly, one of the outcomes that also came out of my capstone is the articles that were written either by myself or media houses highlighting my work and also just passing across key messages that I felt the broader audience should know. So I utilized opportunities that came of talking to the media to let the broad audience know of the plastic crisis, how it is impacting coastal ecosystem, and what we can do collectively, to move away from that. And one of the media houses that I actually talked to is the Nation Media Group. The Nation Media Group is the largest media group, media house in Kenya in terms of, print readership. So readership of their newspapers. And I was lucky to be featured in two of their newspapers, which is the Business Daily and the Daily Nation, talking about various aspects of plastics, from microplastics to the impact on human health and coastal ecosystem. But also I was also featured in other media, especially digital media. I was featured in Africa Equity Media, and I was also featured in the Wildlife Conservation Network online media. And so these are photos from the AMSEN, the African Ministerial Summit on Environment, that took place in Dakar, Senegal. And these are the various ministers and various decision makers, delegates, and representatives from civil society and other organizations that were present during this crucial meeting that happened in September 2022. This is a photo from Montreal, Canada, when I was part of the youth delegation. And here we have the Minister for Environment from Kenya, Honorable Soipan Tuya, and the CBD focal point for Kenya, Dr. Mageria, and other host of government representatives that came to this decision-making conference. So these are some of the things that I proposed to the Climate Change Act, just to address plastic pollution as a key driver of Kenya's biodiversity laws, the need of an integrated multi-stakeholder whole of government approach, the need to review existing legal frameworks because some of them have not been efficient. For example, the plastic ban in Kenya has been in existence for about 6 years now, but we still have this plastic crisis. So there is a need to rethink either, the enforcement of that law, or to rethink, some elements of that law that could use some polishing to make the things work. And of course, formal recognition on categorization of plastics, so that we know where to concentrate our efforts. We know the stakeholders of the manufacturers to involve, and we know where to start if we have to truly address this problem. And also just harmonization of data. So for example, moving away from the belief that it's only formalized institutions and consultants that can provide, quality data, but just also embracing the fact that citizen science and tools such as the ones that I'm trying to create can be avenues where we can generate quality data that can help us understand how plastics are flowing, the complexity of it, and how to move forward. And one of the things that I also did during my capstone project is to have this community forums where I would talk with different role players. And here I was having a forum with beach management unit from a place called Msambweni, which is one of the nesting areas of the sea turtles. And they were just like raising their voices and concerns and comments regarding the plastic situation in Msambweni and what they think they can play as, most of them are fishermen. They can play as fisher persons, as local community members, and some of them are village elders. So how they can contribute to even the local policy formulation, because the village elders in this area have some sort of a direct connection with the local authorities and the area governor. And so by talking to these people, I had a chance to pass some insights to them, as much as they also educated me on how we can move forward together in addressing some of the plastics that are found on our beach. For example, discarded gear, how can they play a fundamental role in reducing the amount of discarded gear that ends up in these critical nesting habitats for sea turtles. And this is the paper that I co-published with the other early career ocean professionals. And one thing that I loved about this paper is the question of who is missing in this trash talk? Who is missing in the dialogue around plastics? And who should be brought on board? And when you look at the article contents on the left, you realize that one of the sections is primarily just dedicated on missing stakeholders. And this is a paper that is available online. You can look for it and you can read it and help us also, disseminate this information, or probably add comments on who you think is not in this trash talk. Because for us to move forward, we need everybody on board. We need all hands on decks and boots on the beach to ensure that everyone is having this conversation, everyone is on the same note, and we are moving forward as a unit. And these are some of the newspapers where I was featured in. The first one on the left side is an article by Africa Equity Media, where I was just talking about, the plastic pollution in marine ecosystems across Africa, but giving specific reference to Kenya. The one on the left on the lower side is an article from Wildlife Conservation Network that highlighted my work on marine plastics and sea turtles, entitled Clearing the Way for Sea Turtles. And the one on the right is an article that was published by the National Media Group, both print and digital, which looked at microplastics and how they continue to choke our country despite a ban on plastics that has been in existence since 2017. And there's also one thing that we need to look at when we're talking about plastics. Apart from the impact on the direct impact on marine animals and the ocean ecosystems, and by extension, human beings, plastic crisis is also a social and environmental justice. Communities that are at the forefront of plastic pollution are always disproportionately affected compared to their counterparts in the areas where these plastics come from. These communities are the ones that bear the biggest burden in terms of whether it is health-related impacts or whether it is reduction in performance of the ecosystems that they depend on a day-to-day basis, such as the fisher persons. If research, for example, the current research that shows that we are, by 2050 we'll have more plastics in the ocean than fish, then the fisher persons, like the ones that I have been talking to, are the ones at the forefront of being, disadvantaged by this increased prevalence of the plastic pollution. The health crisis, look at all the medical waste that I highlighted that end up in our beach. All those syringes, contaminated waste. Who is disproportionately exposed? The people on the receiving end. And so it's time to start looking at this plastic crisis as an injustice that is socially and environmentally connected, so that we look at where the plastic is coming from. This whole idea of countries exporting plastics or dumping trash to other countries. It's very, very socially unjust, and it's time that we talk it out. Another injustice actually is the climate injustice, that the fossil fuel company is continuing on a business as usual model, while communities, especially those in the South, that are contributing very little to the climate crisis, are having the biggest burden of that. They are the ones who are facing, coastal erosion, coastal flooding, cyclones, increased drought spells, and all these sea level rise, and all these other, climate-related challenges. Yet they contribute the least to the emissions. They contribute the least to the manufacturing of the plastics. They contribute, most of them even contribute the least to, consumption of the plastics themselves, because, if you look at the rate of consumption of plastics, it also varies across the world. And so these communities, some of them don't even have that huge purchasing power to consume huge amounts of plastics, but they consume huge amounts of the burden that flow into their areas. And so for us to have a very candid and solid discussion around plastics, we must also bring the aspect of justice to that dialogue table. And this project couldn't have been this successful if not for the warm and generous support of my project advisors, Dr. Catherine Sido, Dan Bromba, and Dr. Nyawira Mudhiga. Thank you so much for being a huge part of this journey, for your consistent provision of guidance, for holding my hand when I needed it most, and for encouraging me even when I was working on a truly stressful topic. Working on plastics is not an easy thing. It's very depressing. But having a team that believes in you, that thinks that you are headed somewhere, and that what you're doing could contribute to something, it's very encouraging. And I felt very supported. And so thank you so much for being part of this. And so thank you so much. And I also give a shout out to the communities that I worked with here at the Kenyan Coast, the beach management units, the Sea Turtle Scouts, children like the one on the photo who would religiously turn out to clean the beaches, collect plastics, and help with the brand auditing, sorting processes, other civil society organization, the Kenyan Youth Biodiversity Network. So thank you so much. And I hope that the next step of this project will be to transform the data into more accessible, more useful forms, and to continue on that path of citizen science and policy engagement, so that we can hopefully realize a sustainable planet, not just for sea turtles, but also for us as human beings. Thank you so much. Asanteni sana.